Hello, in this quick video I am going to walk you through how to get started on your properties of common gases activity. So our goal in this activity is really to become familiar with the properties of gases data table. So here's what your data table is going to look like. You're going to grab one of these from the 6th grade paper pocket chart. And you're going to be looking for patterns in data. So just a really quick reminder, how do we decide if this something that we've identified is a pattern in the data? So we need to decide, does it help us understand the story that the data tells? If we say no, it's not really helping us figure out the bigger story, the bigger picture of what the data is about. It's just like, I see a pattern in numbers, I see a couple zeros, I see a couple ones, then that's not a pattern in the data. If it does tell us a story about the data, then that is a pattern in the data. So keep that in mind as you are identifying patterns. So we are going to start by setting up a identify interpret table and identifying 3 patterns in the data. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my camera view, and I'm going to go ahead and just model how I might circle and find one pattern in the data. I've got my properties of common gases data table, and I'm going to look for a pattern. But before I look for a pattern, I'm going to actually just take a moment and look at the data table, and what do I notice? So I notice up at the top I've got some column headings. So my first column is substance. So I've got all sorts of different gases. I've heard of a couple of these before. I've heard of oxygen, I've heard of carbon dioxide, I've heard of neon and helium. My second column is the approximate percent of this gas in the air outside. I see boiling point in degrees Celsius. I see density in grams per liter. And I see flammability, which is how the gas interacts with the flame. So I think I'm going to focus on boiling point. So I'm going to look through my boiling point data. I'm going to see what kind of patterns do I notice. Now I know that boiling point is when a liquid turns into a gas. So I know that this number is going to tell me when all these different substances become gases. Well, the big thing I notice, and I notice it pretty much with every one of these, is that every single one of these numbers starts with a negative. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my entire column because that's where the pattern is. And I'm going to label that number 1. All right, so now I'm going to bring up my piece of paper, and I know I have to do an identify and interpret column. So I'm going to write identify and interpret, and I'm going to start off by focusing on my first thing that I noticed. So I identified that every single boiling point was in negative. So every boiling point is a negative temperature. And again, I'm just going to put that this is in degrees Celsius, and I know that if it's a negative in degrees Celsius, it's super cold. So I'm going to interpret that gases, or these gases, become gas from liquid at really cold temperatures, which means that normally we don't ever experience these really cold temperatures. So normally, like in my everyday life, that's why these are gases, because our normal life is well above 0 degrees Celsius. Right, so now I've modeled how I would find a pattern in the data. You're going to go ahead and do this on your own. So you're looking for 3 patterns in the data. You're going to make an identify interpret table and then fill that out for each of those patterns. If you want to challenge yourself with the should do, go ahead and interpret and find, identify and interpret a couple more patterns.